Say when. Hello, this is Michael Roche from Vermont Arborist, and this is my video Tree ID 102, identifying evergreens, also called conifers. So when people very often look at an evergreen forest, they see this sea of green, and they start saying, well, what pine tree is that? And Michael, can you tell me what pine tree that is, and what pine tree is that? And actually, none of those are pine trees, okay? There's spruce in there, and there's hemlock in there, probably the occasional fir, but there's no pine tree. There's a pine tree over there. Can you focus on that and all? And that's a pine tree, but none of these are. So very often people look at an evergreen forest and they say, I have no idea what those trees are. And so let me give you the basics on what you can do to learn about what the different evergreen or conifer trees are. And so we're going to start out with the pine. And when it comes to identifying all the evergreens, I want you to remember this one word. And that one word is fascicle, okay? And I know what you're thinking already. You're saying, Michael, fascicles. This is interesting. This could be more interesting than a Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston relationship. I know, because that's what I'm thinking too. That possibly fascicles are more interesting than the lifestyles of the famous people. And sorry for the stumble, I got a bum knee. But what a fascicle is a clump of needles. And this is a white pine. And white pine come in clusters of 5 needles. And if you count it, it's a 5-needle pine. And you pull it off nice and gentle, you'll see that there's 5 needles there. And so white pine is in 5 needles. Okay? Whereas red pine, which is this one, okay, is in 2 needles. 2-needle fascicles. Okay? So let me pull one off. And you see that? Much longer needles too, but the main thing is it's in 2 needles. See that? So pines are grouped into 5 needles and 2 needles. And so if you're wandering around the woods and you see a tree, and you say, wonder what pine that is. And it's not in a bundle. It's not in this little fascicle group here. It's not a pine. It has to be something else. Okay? And we're going to get to that. But if it is, and it's 2 needles, and you're in the woods, you're not in the landscape, it has to be a red pine if you're in northern and central New England. Okay? Occasionally a jack pine comes down out of Canada, and it's a 2-needle pine, but not very often, so don't worry about it. All right? So you got a red pine, 2 needles, white pine over here is 5 needle. That's probably your most common pine in Vermont and in north central New England. Okay? So again, if you have a fascicle, it has to be a pine. It's not a spruce, so don't even worry about it. All right? Now, the next tree, okay, is hemlock. Okay? And the hemlock has got flat needles, and everything is on just 1 needle goes into the stem. Okay? That's the way it works. All the others pretty much, except for the tamarack, we'll get to it, pretty much all the needles go directly into the stem. And the way you identify a hemlock, and it's very interesting, is that it has what's called a drooping leader, okay? And notice how this is the top of the tree. I trimmed it off, and this is the top of the tree, and it's a drooping leader. And you're going to say to yourself, Michael, I didn't know that. And I'm going to say, I know. Why would you? Most people wouldn't know that, right? So here you have a drooping leader that comes off of the hemlock. And if you notice on these other hemlocks here, look closely, and you'll see drooping leaders at the top of all of them. And trees, all of them, whether it's an oak or a maple or a pine or a spruce, they grow out of what's called the apical meristem. The apical meristem is right up here, right? It's the top of the tree. And so it's where a tree grows out of to go tall. That's why if you drive a nail into a tree at 5 feet, bring it over here if you would. So that's why if you drive a nail into a tree, you know, around, say, 5-6 feet, 10 years from now, it's still at 5-6 feet because it doesn't grow the whole thing. It grows from the apical meristem, which of course then makes you say, Michael, why is it that this thing is got a drooping leader and yet it doesn't grow sideways? And my answer is, I don't know. I really don't. Right? It should. You would think it'd have to grow like this in order to grow straight, but it doesn't. It grows like, it's got a drooping leader. It's got bad posture. So if you are thinking of a tree and you're saying, what is that tree? It's got bad posture at the top. Okay. His mother told it to stand up straight. It didn't. All right. That's hemlock. All right. So go with that. And don't go getting fooled by an evergreen tree that's been bent over by the ice and the snow. All right. Knock the snow off first. But if you see it's still got a drooping leader, it's got bad posture, it has to be a hemlock, as long as it doesn't have any fascicles, right? So there's where you are. That's hemlock. Now, that leaves us, oh, wow, okay. That leaves us to spruce and fir. And this is the only hard part about this, all right, is the difference between a spruce and a fir. And here's one of the main things. If you go grabbing it, okay, and it's all spiky and hurts your hand, that's spruce. Spruce are mean, all right? Think of spruce as being kind of that mean tree. You're walking through the woods, right, sometimes, and unbeknownst to you, you go hitting a branch, it catches you right in the cheek or right beside the eye and kind of cuts you open. Almost all the time, it's a spruce tree. Spruce trees got an attitude, all right? I'm not always, they're not always my favorite tree because they've cut me open more than once. But here's the thing about spruce trees is that all the needles, they grow on their own little wooden peg, all right? And I'm going to get to the fir in a sec, but you see that? You see those little wooden pegs? That's where the needles were attached, okay? And so each of these needles, if you looked real close, you would see that each one is on its own little wooden peg, and that's where they came from, but they all just fell off. And down here they fell off. It's just the older part of the branch. All right? Fir trees, they don't stick you. So when you grab them, they don't stick you. They don't hurt. They're kind of soft. And they're not on their own little wooden pegs. Okay? They're more just attached in a little cup-like pattern. So let's go back for a second. Then if you have a tree in a bundle or in a fascicle, okay, you have a pine. If it's 5 needles, it's white pine. 2 needles, it's red pine. If it's got bad posture, that means it's a hemlock. And if it's spiky and it sticks you, okay, that means it's a spruce. And if it's not spiky, doesn't stick you, and it's got good posture, it's a fir. All right, so there you got all those. Now that leaves you with the cedars and the tamarack. And the tamarack is down here beside my dog. And the dog has chewed up the tamarack. So we're going to have a hard time with tamarack in a little bit, but we'll get into it. All right? Unbeknownst to me. But then so now you got the you got cedars, and cedars are what I would call something of a taxonomy problem, and in that this is northern white cedar, also called arborvitae. And you go to the nursery, sometimes people call them arbs. That's an arb, okay? It's in the thuja genus. This cedar, this is a red cedar, okay? It is in the Juniperus genus, so it's a juniper. So, and then you also have these other cedars that say over in Asia, and they're in the cedrus genus. So I don't know what Einstein came along to decide that a thuja should be a cedar. Maybe he just couldn't pronounce thuja. I mean, it's Thuja. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, you know? But that's what a cedar looks like, and there's not a lot of them out in the woods, so I don't think we're going to get real uptight about them and all. And that is the red cedar, which is in the Juniperus family, so it's more related to juniper. So now you can get mad at this, you know, and you start going to fight or flight mode, and you really can't go into fight mode because it's generations of people calling cedars, calling 3 different species, all of them, or 3 different genuses, all of them cedars. And so let's not go into fight mode. Let's go into flight mode. Let's just get rid of the problem and make them fly away. Okay? So now that leaves us with tamarack. Tamarack, which is I only got pieces left because some dog decided that she had the right to that stick more than me. But tamarack is the only evergreen that's not an evergreen. Okay? And it has these bundles here. Okay? And they all fall off. It's a deciduous conifer. It's the only deciduous conifer. So if you have a conifer and it's in, near your house or you're off walking in the woods and it had needles on it and it didn't die, but you're walking around in the late fall or the winter and all, it doesn't have its needles on it anymore, it has to be a tamarack, okay? And their bundles are in 10 to 20. It's nothing like the fascicles. These aren't called fascicles, they're called bundles. So try not to get too confused on it, but tamarack loses its needles in the winter. So let's do our final review. You have, get my glove on, it's cold out today. So you got pine, fascicles, right? I know, fascinating word for you. And they're in 2 needles, which is the red pine group, and there is the 5 needles, which is white pine. And that's off in the woods. You can occasionally find, other trees in the landscape like Scotch pine and Austrian pine that are 2 needle pines, but based on the name, where do you think they're from? All right. So if you're in the New England woods, you're not going to find a 2 needle pine other than the red pine. Okay. Then you got the white pine, 5 needles. After that, you have the tree, the evergreen tree with the bad posture, drooping leader, okay? That's a hemlock. After that, all right, wait, let me pull it up. Let me do that. I should have done that, okay? White pine, 5 needles, right? Quick review. There we go. Red pine, 2 needles in the fascicle. Hemlock, drooping leader, right? There it is. Spruce, this one, got the wooden pegs on it, and the fir, which is nice and soft, no wooden pegs, okay? And then finally the tamarack, which are not real common, and they are your conifer tree that is not evergreen. And by the way, conifer means cone bearing, so that's why they are all grouped in that grouping together, okay? This is Michael Roach from Vermont Arborist, saying have a good walk in the winter woods.